Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Saturday, the 25th of January. Oh, it's my sister's birthday. Happy birthday, Sandra. And that makes this the news for Friday, the 24th of January, 2025, day 1066 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression. And I've been trying all day to find some correlation to the Battle of Hastings, something to about 1066, but I couldn't come up with anything compelling. Anyway, I see the peeps are coming in. Hey, Debbie, how you doing? Hey, Robin. Hey, Bobby. Hey, Step. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, G2. Hey, Anthony, Tommy, Tom. Brian Kornbaugh. How are we doing tonight, everybody? Good evening. It is a big day. Oh, is it a big day? Let's not kid ourselves. Hey, Steve with a V. The Russians did some damage last night, no two ways about it. But Ukraine hit Russia hard last night. So let's see. Last night, it was a small attack, only 58 drones sent at Ukraine, 90% of them shot down. But some of them did get through. The 6 that got through, some of them hit Kyiv in a deadly drone attack last night that left a married couple unalived in their beds. 3 people in total were unalived last night. And there are a double dozen people in the hospital from last night's drone attack on Kyiv. Now, that drone attack, and as bad as the personal tragedies of the married couple and the third person that were unalived last night are, it is important to recognize that Ukraine is not sitting still. And last night, Ukraine turned around and struck Russia with at least 121 drones. The Russians are claiming that they shot down 121 drones, that the drones were all intercepted, that no one was injured, and there was no damage on the ground. At least that was the official word from the Russian MOD this morning. It has since changed in light of the voluminous amount of videos online of Russia on fire, and Russia is on fire. Make no mistake. The first thing that happened last night, the second largest microelectronics plant in Russia was destroyed. Second biggest microelectronics plant, destroyed. Not hit, not on fire, leveled, according to the general staff reporting this morning. They are out of business. They will not be making electronic components, guidance systems, control modules for the Iskander, for the S-400, S-300 systems, for combat aviation. They will not be doing any of the stuff that puts brains into the weapons of Russia. Brilliant, beautiful. Then we saw Rosneft's Ryazan oil refinery and thermal power plant burning. At least 3 tanks at the oil depot caught fire. That fire spread into the workshop where the hydro treatment unit for diesel and for manufacturing diesel and aviation fuel resided. That unit is said to be destroyed. That means that they can't produce diesel for tanks and armored vehicles, nor can they produce aviation fuel for the jets. It's offline, and it's going to be offline until they can rebuild that unit, if they even can under sanctions. That remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. As bad as the fire was in the oil depot, the explosion of the thermal power plant at Ryazan last night blew that away. It was a mushroom cloud, hundreds of meters in the air, right? Now that's a thermal power plant. They generate heat for the local community, as well as electricity. And it is said that they are gone. Gone. The whole thing blew up. Dyagilev Air Base and Saratov were also targeted, but we don't have any reports of damage from those places. Not yet, anyway. Their video did emerge online of Vladimir Putin's convoy of security forces rushing him from his residence in Moscow to the bunker at the Kremlin, like a distressed cat at 1 o'clock in the morning last night. I assume he's not going to be leaving that bunker anytime soon. Now, so last night we saw a scaled attack on critical infrastructure of the army of the Russian Federation that will limit their ability to prosecute this war. Hey, Chef Deb. Okay, now, last night I mentioned that the Indian oil company, the state-owned Indian oil company, Indian Oil, is going to stop buying Russian oil. I just have a follow-up to that. The oil secretary for India, who knew India had an oil secretary, I didn't know, but the oil secretary for India, Jane, did clarify today that tankers have until the 27th of February to unload their cargo, and then the financials must be wrapped up, so the oil must be paid for, by the 11th of March. That doesn't give these guys a lot of time. But after that, the flow of oil, of Russian oil into India should stop. Back in October, remember we talked about a rather dire assessment from AC Tech. That's a state analytics company. It's under the Department of Energy inside Russia. Right, so this is official Russian Department of Energy report that said that likely half of Russia's 174 working coal mines were facing bankruptcy in 2025. That the industry had gone from posting profits of 357 billion rubles, about $357 million in 2023, to losses in 2024 of 34 billion rubles, or losses of about $34 million. The entire industry is underwater in Russia. They have just received bad news from China. China is going to stop purchasing Russian coal. Even though the demand for coal in Russia is up like 15% in 2024. The Chinese have been buying less and less Russian coal, mostly because it's more expensive than Mongolian or Australian coal. And so they are stopping the purchase, we believe, of virtually all coal from Russia. As one of Russia's largest buyers, this is going to severely impact the industry. And we could see more than the projected 100, what's half of 174? Whatever that number is, that's what's expected to go into bankruptcy this year. At Davos, Trump called on Saudi Arabia to reduce oil prices, as if that's a thing, as if the manufacturer will just reduce prices, that there isn't a subtle and delicate balance between supply and demand in an open market. And then he went on to say, I'm surprised they didn't do it before the election. Now look, for anybody who follows this channel, or for anybody who is paying attention to the oil markets, you know very well that this is nonsense. Saudi Arabia announced back in October, before the election, that they would be raising production, right? We anticipate that China and India, because of fear of secondary sanctions, will stop buying Russian oil. And in fact, India has already announced that that's the case. Given that reality, you're talking about a 2 million barrel a day opening in the market. Saudi Arabia is going to make it up. They're going to raise production by 1 million barrels a day. They're going to take half of those customers. Somebody else will raise production. Other countries will raise production. They'll make up the other 1 million barrels. The price will stay the same, and everybody makes money but Russia. That's for him to say these things, knowing that they're going to come true in the next 60 days because Saudi Arabia has already increased its production, is just gaslighting of the worst kind. And it shows us exactly who Donald Trump is. He's an idiot who thinks everybody else is as stupid as he is. God, he makes me sick. As disassociated from reality as Trump's comments were, the comments of Lavrov and Putin were just as disassociated and far more dangerous, in my opinion. Lavrov said the words, if the U.S. under Trump takes Russia's interests into account, the dialogue between Moscow and Washington will be restored. If not, nothing will change. Now look, you can't take Russia's interests into account. Russia is the aggressor state who, in violation of the UN Charter and all international law, launched an illegal war and genocide into Ukraine. Their interests shouldn't be of concern to anybody. Nobody should give a fuck what they want. They're in the wrong. They need to be brought to heel. They need to be defeated. Period. End of conversation. But what worries me is that Trump doesn't have any moral compass. Trump doesn't have any belief system. He is completely transactional in his nature. He has already said, NATO up against Russia's borders. I can understand how you wouldn't want that. Completely ignoring the fact that Ukraine has its own sovereignty. It's a nightmare. And what worries me is that Trump will take Russia's interests into account. And then Russia will get a win out of this war. And that is what the world cannot allow. Cannot allow it. Now, let's see. Putin shared his own cadre of delusions today, blaming Zelensky for the lack of talks. Now, look, if the aggressor nation will talk only if you are willing to completely capitulate to them and submit to their will, those aren't talks. That's not negotiations. That's capitulation. So this notion that Zelensky is somehow behind the lack of talks is bullshit of the first order. The only one not talking is the aggressor. Nobody in the United States that's paying attention wants their money back. The money we spent decimating the Russian army is the best money we have ever spent. It is the best return on investment that we have ever known. So please, you gotta be kidding me. Anyway, Putin went on to say about Trump, I always had businesslike, pragmatic, and trusting relations with Trump. Now, first of all, neither Trump nor Putin are people to be trusted. No one should trust any of them, either of them. And then this idea of businesslike and pragmatic, that is the problem. Donald Trump is businesslike and pragmatic, and so he will take Russia's interest into account, and he will Give Putin a win. That's my big concern. That's my big concern. And just like he offered to do Putin a big favor and end the war, Putin did him a big favor and repeated Trump's favorite lie. The lie that if the 2020 election had not been stolen, Putin would never have invaded. This is such nonsense. Nonsense of the first order. Putin has prepared for this war for years. Don't forget, he first invaded in 2014. This war isn't 3 years old, it's 11 years old. So this is total nonsense. Maria Zakharova, for her part, listen to this. Now, what have we been saying on this channel? We've been saying that Trump's whole plan to put peacekeepers into a ceasefire scenario in Ukraine, in the temporarily occupied territories, was a non-starter for Russia, that in no world would Russia ever agree to this condition. And that position was finally today. Now, this is so important to understand, right? And for all you trolls that are in here tonight, listen to what Maria Zakharova, your chief trolless, had to say. NATO troops in Ukraine are completely unacceptable to Russia. It will lead to unlimited escalation. Okay, so there's so much that's ridiculous about this. They had to trot out the escalation card again, trying to scare the West. Escalation, escalation, escalation. But not only that, implicit in this statement that NATO troops in Ukraine are a non-starter for Russia is the acknowledgement that there are no NATO troops in Russia. How many of you 5 ruble a comment jerks out there have written the words, NATO is in Russia, even here, right? So please, your chief strategist and propagandist just acknowledged there are no NATO troops in Russia, in Ukraine. So get a grip. Get a grip, you jerks. And not only that, you should know, if you're on the South Africa team, if you're part of the team of bots and trolls that was just hired by Russia down in South Africa, they stiffed the Ghanans for 4 months worth of pay. 4 months. The bot farm in Ghana didn't get paid before the Kremlin stopped answering their calls. You think you're going to get paid, South Africa? You're never going to see a dime. I guess the way it goes is they pay the first month, then the second month it's late, the third month it's even later, and then that's the last money you see. That is the last money you see, and they will work you to the bone for nothing. So congratulations on your new jobs, South Africa. You're about to get fucked the same way that Russia is fucking Ukraine. On the front line. On the front line, there's no real movement. Now, Viktor Trebov, spokesman for the Ukrainian armed forces, said that Russia is failing to outflank Pokrovsk in Donetsk. So far, all these attacks have been repelled. Things are not as good in Velika Novosilka. In Velika Novosilka, the Ukrainian armed forces are cut off. They are trapped in the cauldron. I am not aware of how many men are in there. But today, the Russians established fire control over the last road out of the settlement. And so our thoughts, our hopes, our prayers, our dreams are with the Ukrainian armed forces who are currently trapped and besieged in Velika Novosilka. And I hope that somebody can get them out of there, that there's a way to get them out of there. Please. Chasiv Yar, Chasiv Yar, all attacks were repelled today. And then in Kursk, the UAF destroyed several large armored columns. Well, several armored columns. Apparently, the attacks came in one tank and four armored personnel carriers at a time, each attack with about 60 infantry troops. But here's the problem. Well, there's several problems. The weather in Ukraine is not like a normal winter. I'm looking at the extended forecast. This next week, it's going to be nearly 50. That's about what, 5 Celsius? In Kyiv, it's 40 in Kursk. All the snow melted. And what happened? It turned the ground boggy and muddy. And all of those Fab 500 craters filled with water. So you have like this 50 degrees, Fitz, next week. In the last week in January, in Kyiv, Ukraine. And tell me climate change isn't real. The Ukrainians are all talking about it at lunch last weekend, how different Ukraine is from their childhood. Anyway, and it makes sense, right? Because Ukraine's right on the Black Sea. That's a major heat sink. That's going to ameliorate the weather here. And as the temperature in that body of water goes up, it ameliorates it even further, exacerbating the weather changes due to climate change. Anyway, so first you got the bad weather. Not the bad weather, but the warm weather. Ground is a boggy mess. Then you got all these enormous craters that are now a series of ponds because they're filled with water. And then you have the Dragon's Teeth fortifications that the Russians put up to stop the Ukrainians, that the Ukrainians are now using to stop the Russians. That is amazing. That is just amazing to me. So these 3 columns, 3 tanks, 12 armored personnel carriers, about 180 troops, there were no survivors. There were no survivors. And these were Russians, not North Koreans. The snow in the south in the U.S. is a function of climate change as well, right? That Arctic vortex, what happens is, because the oceans are warmer, the jet stream moves south, and then that lets that polar vortex come down from the north. So all of that is a direct result. This planet is on a climactic knife edge. And the more that we pour CO2 into the atmosphere, the harder and longer it is going to take us to slow the rate of change down. Anyway, the U.S. warns that Russia may have breached conditions of the 2010 New START nuclear treaty, which limits the deployment of nuclear weapons to 1,550. The U.S. suspects that Russia has exceeded that number by a small amount. Now, the only problem is that when you're talking about, 3,100 nuclear weapons, another 7 hardly makes a difference. If they were all shot off, civilization as we understand it would come to an end. So it's very disconcerting to see the Russians exceeding those. Like, what is the point? You want to make the earth unlivable forever for faster? I don't know. Gazprom is broke. Gazprom is broke, and they are demanding that the Russian people pay the price for Putin's war. They want to raise tariffs for independent sellers by 200%, triple the rate. Retail prices by the end of 2025 will be up 37% since the start of the war. Can you imagine your heating bill is up 40% in just 5 years? They have halved the staff. They showed a record net loss last year of $6.1 billion. And the stock hit an all-time low of 106 rubles, or about $1.06 a share. Gazprom is done. It is unlikely that that business will ever recover from the damage that Vladimir Putin has done. And when one thinks that it is a Russian state-owned monopoly in a country with the largest reserves of natural gas that we know of, it's the poster child for the self-harm that Putin has done to Russia, in my opinion. Panama and Barbados have stripped 114 ships of the Shadow Fleet of their flags of convenience. While this doesn't stop the unsanctioned oil, it does slow it down. There's paperwork to do, there's fees to pay, you got to change the flags, but that process has apparently already begun. Lukashenko, Reporters Without Borders, the nonprofit international organization that represents freedom in journalism, has filed a complaint with the ICC requesting an investigation and warrant against Lukashenko for crimes against humanity. Since 2020, when Lukashenko's crackdown against his opposition party drove them all into exile or into jail, he has arrested, according to these guys, 397 journalists, and 43 of them remain in prison. And so it may soon be that both Putin and Lukashenko have International Criminal Court arrest warrants out for them. Finally, here's a funny for my buddy Clay, if he's around tonight. What kills me is that the Russians released the video. This is what I don't understand, is why are you constantly releasing video that makes you look like a jerk? It's absolutely crazy to me. So this video, it's a collection of videos of first-person view drones slamming into a Leopard 2 tank. So it's a German tank out on the battlefield in Ukraine. First-person view drone slams into it. No effect. Next one slams into it. No effect. Third one slams into it. No effect. This continues. A dozen drones slam into this tank, and it is completely unaffected aside from some scorch marks. I don't know what kind of drones they were using, but they are clearly not scaled for German engineering, Pugga Mahone, right? Whatever those drones were the Russians were using, they were using the wrong ones. No two ways about it. Oh, I forgot to mention that battle in Kursk. The reason it was so one-favored inside of the Ukrainians is because of a visit from St. Javelin. St. Javelin showed up on the battlefield, and that was the end of that. It didn't matter how many armored vehicles they sent. In succession, each one was destroyed with an anti-tank weapon. Timu drones from Wish. Cyberdoc, how you doing, Cyberdoc? Okay, so big thanks to James Boudreau, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. We sure do appreciate you, James. And let me know when you get to Kyiv. And big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, to the moderators, and to Lars, who has the Discord server. Okay, kids, questions and answer time. Where's all my South African trolls? Where'd you guys go? Did you all leave? That would be very disappointing to me. You were talking such shit before. I'd like to tell you personally to fuck off. Does anybody else have any questions? Because it's Friday. If nobody's got any questions, I wouldn't mind wrapping it up early tonight, I'll tell you. Oh, yeah, it's great to have Germany on our side. Hey, Cole. It is great having Germany on our side, boy. And not just Germany, a reunified Germany where half the people are freed from being under the thumb of Moscow. Anthony, as I understand it, artillery barrels will get you 1,500 to 2,000 shots each. In a live fire situation like we're in here in a hot war, I'm sure everybody's pushing those barrels as far as they can. But after 2,000 rounds, the integrity of the barrel is of real question. So big thanks to Sheffield Forge Works for the 150 new barrels that arrived just this week, and for the what's on order and that will be on its way. You hope the trolls hit the like before leaving. Your riot fits. Dude, you're so funny, man. Get back to tapping, Arn. No, I don't care. It's Lars that cares more about the likes than I do. It really is. Mel, any Gravehawk news? No. A couple have arrived here, apparently. We don't know really how many. You were the one that sent me the first pictures I'd ever seen of one. And I understand that Gravehawk is also coming out of Sheffield Forge Works, or at least components of it are. The metal works are coming out of Sheffield Forge Works. What's the process you need to go through to stay in Kyiv to keep giving us the best news? I'm here, and I've taken care of all the paperwork, Michael. I have a temporary residency. The biggest thing for me is that I have to be able to eat and pay the rent. That's all. And so you joining the Patreon at the Shark level and then upgrading your membership to Magura, it means a lot, man. I literally could not do this without the 100 Patreon guys well, it's not 100 anymore. I had a bad week, and I lost about 7 Patreon supporters. My income fell by about 15% this week. So if there's anybody out there that can join the Patreon, kick me $5 a month. Or, as the very generous Michael did, $10 a month. If you can do any of that, and that's what's needed to keep me here. Because, while I'm here, one thing I can't do as a temporary resident is work. And so I can't actually work in Ukraine. And so I depend on you guys to keep me here. Wonder how long does it take to replace the barrels? That's a great question, Dark Irish. I don't have the slightest idea. I would guess that they are made to be replaced, right? That process, whatever it is, because I can't imagine what these things weigh. But my guess is that whatever the process is, it's pretty efficient. Because if you had to change that fucking barrel after it banana peeled on you in a firefight, you'd want that process to be as down and dirty and quick as easy as it could be. But it would always have to involve a crane, right? You gotta lift the barrel. I don't believe 2 men could do that. I don't know, but I don't believe. It's a great question. Something to Google. Some insight about the German-Italian tank. Tefel, I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're asking there. How do I think the war will end? I don't have any idea. Trump, I don't have any idea. I know how I want it to end. That's all I know. And if I were to answer that question, Jay, all you'd be getting is my wish thinking. And I'll tell you what that is. If Putin is allowed to get any gains out of this war, it's going to be a nightmare for the next 100 years. That's what worries me. Thank you, Arn. I'm okay. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I am thinking, okay, so now, hey, maybe I'll just throw this out there. Guys can think about it. I am thinking of going to Slovakia. There are tens of thousands. I didn't have a chance to create the report for it tonight. I wanted to make a video about it. I wanted to have it in the Live at 5, but I did not have a chance to get it in there. There are tens of thousands of people in the streets of Slovakia protesting Fico. We talk about dominoes to watch, right? And Slovakia is a domino to watch. If Slovakia heats up, I personally would think that going to Bratislava at this critical time could be, beneficial. Talk to people on the street, sense the mood, bring back footage of what's really happening, which I cannot do, which I can't get to Georgia, right? I would go to Georgia if I could get there without a plane ticket. But to get to Bratislava, you're talking about $75 round trip on the train. It's very doable. So I am thinking about going to Bratislava. Now, next week, James Boudreau was tonight's sponsor. Next week, I have no live sponsors at all, guys. So if anybody is interested in sponsoring a live next week, the PayPal is in the description. Or for long-term support, which is far more meaningful to me, consider joining the Patreon if you can afford to kick me $5 or $10 a month without it affecting your other charitable giving. It's an investment in this business, the business of disambiguating Russian disinformation and keeping Ukraine in the front of people's minds. Hey, Jeff Robbins. How detrimental is the company that closed, metal company, to the war effort? Ron, I don't know what you're talking about there, pal. Can you give me some more details? Hello, Maestro. Hey, Feisty. Does Feisty have a moose? That does not surprise me. Well, it all depends, Arn, right? Like if Fico crushes the protest tomorrow, although that might be more interesting, honestly. I don't know, man. I appreciate it. The thing with Slovakia and Fico is how detrimental he has been to Ukraine and to his own people. It's a domino to watch. Oh, yeah, it is. Michael, you're doing everything. Michael, please. I appreciate it. But you're doing everything that any normal working person could do. That Patreon subscription, $10 a month. Hopefully that doesn't prevent you from buying a Starbucks if you want one, right? But it means everything to me. It means everything to me. So don't you worry about me, pal. I'm in good shape. Feisty on a moose with a lance. Somebody has AI up. Come on, generate that picture. Yeah, common sense. You're right, of course. I mean, what do you think? What do you think about me going to Bratislava? Does it make sense to go to Slovakia and check it out in person? Does that give the news a more visceral feel when you're live and on the scene and you're talking to the people? I don't know how common English is there, and I do not speak Slovakian. Thank you, Maestro. Hey, Van. Yeah, I mean, I've got a little bit of experience of getting along in a country where I don't speak the language, but it would be nice if any of my listeners are in Bratislava and speak English and the local language and would be interested in showing me around. Boy, that'd cinch the deal. Arn, then I'd go. Then I would go. Well, Bobby, I'm only talking about a couple days. Does Ukraine have their own anti-missile defense like the U.S. Patriot? They've the short answer to that question is yes. I can't remember what it's called right now. There's a couple of homemade systems, but off the top of my head, the names are escaping me. But nothing as good as the Patriot, except maybe the Gravehawk, which is not domestically produced. Simon, you're not wrong that it's unlikely that Putin will go to jail. It's very unlikely. Unless conditions in Russia can be created that are so bad for the Russians, and someone can convince the oligarchs to turn him over to us for trial and show a contrite face to the world. Because if that doesn't happen, they're going to end him. The Hague. He'd go to jail in The Hague. Yeah, it's unlikely that there is as much English. Now, there's going to be more English in the capital, right? That's why I would go to Bratislava. Why was Putin dragged into the Kremlin last night? Because Russia was on fire and there was more incoming. Now, the Russians claim they shot down all the drones and they claim they shot down 121. But I have seen some crazy things online, and Kyiv is not saying. But there are people who are sort of reliable, who are sort of in a position to know, who claim that Ukraine actually sent 400 drones into Russia last night. Now, if your radar screens were lit up like that, and the oil refinery in Voronezh was already on fire and the power plant blowed up, and there's another 200 of these things coming from Moscow, well, wouldn't you rush the guy to the bunker? Now, Philip, I don't know. As far as I know, only 121 drones went into Russia last night. I cannot say that that 400 figure is meaningful in any way. But the fact that Russia was under a scaled drone attack last night, of course, they're going to want him in the bunker. Hey, Bip. Right, exactly. It's a taste of his own medicine. Evening, Mark. Russia is on the defense, make no mistake. They just unraveled kilometer after kilometer of razor wire in Kursk to stop Ukrainian advances. Russia is on the back foot. There's no two ways about it. Who is the predecessor of Putin? It wasn't Gorbachev. Who was the guy? Yeltsin. Yeltsin was the predecessor of Putin. Philip, if you'd have asked me if I thought Trump would make any kind of positive effect 2 months ago, I would have sworn up and down and cursed and screamed about how awful it was going to be. and how he was going to turn Ukraine over to Russia. Something has changed. And now, as painful as it is for me to acknowledge it, it may be that Trump is exactly the jerk we need right now, at least for Ukraine. That does not excuse the damage he's going to do to the United States. And as an American, I got to tell you, if it was a choice between a strong Trump who would handle Putin and save Ukraine and a weak Biden who would drip, drip, drip support until Russia was worn down, I would have been on the side of Biden. I would have been. Pugga Mahone, that is the least of it. The guy just made $42 billion overnight on his bullshit cryptocurrency. Hey, South Africa's here. Hey, South Africa, you're the new guys, right? You're the new bot farm that the Russians just hired. You know they fucked the Ghanans for 4 months worth of back pay, right? You know you're never getting paid. You're an idiot. It's just that simple. I mean, you can make all the comments in here you like. You will never see those rubles. They are not coming to you. Propaganda. You got nothing else? You got nothing else, Torino? Bullshit, man. You're never getting paid. You're never getting paid. You are a sucker to the Russians. You're just another sucker who's going to get screwed over. Oh, God, you're funny. It probably is. I mean, you know English is not that guy's first language. He probably copied it out of a dictionary online. Anyway, all right. World War III definitely started. It started on February 24th, 2022. Make no mistake. It's just that it's 1939 and it's Czechoslovakia. Norwegian economy experts say that crypto is a way to take money, scam. Yeah, oh, it is. Oh, it is, Lars, just like his NFTs. Do I know anything about a Colombian soldier that was captured by the Russian army? Gilbert, I don't. Now, the International Legion 2nd Battalion has a lot of Colombians in it. 2nd Battalion Charlie Company was where they all were, or not all, but a lot of the Colombians in the International Legion were in that company until maybe 60 days ago when they were suddenly all transferred out, and I don't know where they were transferred to. So it's entirely possible that a Colombian has been taken prisoner, but I don't know the details. Let's make Peter coin. No, dude, because I don't want to rip people off, right? Like, that is not what I do. I mean, do I take money from people? Yes, I do. I'm taking Michael's money every month, $10, bang. Happy to take it. And what I hope happens is that Michael feels like he's part of keeping the information flow from on the ground in Ukraine to a Western audience for whom it is so important, vital and alive. That's the deal here. I'm not raising money for the UAF. I'm not involved in fundraising. This is me personally spending my own money, self-funded, all my savings, to be here to do this because I think it's that important. And so if you can help me do it, right? If you can't afford it, do not give me money. But if you have some extra money and you want to support this channel, please join the Patreon and kick me $5 or $10 a month. Help me make up for the, oh gosh, I think I lost about $170 in income per month last week. And so that's what, that's about 35 Patreon members at $5 a month. If 35 of you right now on here join the Patreon at $5 a month, that would make up the loss from the week. And I would be very grateful. Or if you have a little bit extra money and you want to sponsor a live, send $50 to the PayPal and you will get a live sponsorship next week. Again, let me thank the sponsor of tonight's live, James Boudreau. Let me thank Nightshade, who has the Peters Peeps group on the Book of Faces. And let me thank Lars, who has the Alexievich archive and the Discord server. Bobby, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Bobby is a person I met here on TikTok, but who I would definitely call a good buddy. Having never met in person, I feel a little strange saying we're friends, Bobby. But Bobby has gone out of his way. Bobby and Dan Ballard, those two guys down there in Southern California who are facing wildfires themselves right now, they have been extraordinarily generous and helpful to me. And I'm deeply appreciative of the kind words and the kindness. Thank you, Bobby. Night, Mel. Dan Ballard's here. Hey, Dan Ballard. I did not know you were here. I was talking nice about you. I won't make that mistake again. Good night, Arn. Thanks for the offer, pal. I'll hit you up if we decide to go. Good night, Nana Pam. So that is about it for me. It's just 7 minutes before the top of the hour, but it is almost 1 o'clock in the morning here, and we hit 50,000 likes, which is Lars's goal every night. Thank you, Arn. I genuinely appreciate that. Thank you, Robbo. You're in favor, Daniel, are you? You're in favor of the Bratislava trip? I got my buddy Polino in Slovakia. He's going to get me the date. There's some vote coming up in Parliament. The date hasn't been set yet. Hey, Steve, DTS. There's a vote coming up in the Slovakian Parliament over something. I have to go back and read his email. But he's going to let me know when that's happening. And that's going to be the time that the protests peak. Yeah, you're not wrong, David. You are not wrong, David. Yeah, right, Steve? That's why I'm talking about going, is getting down in the crowd, seeing what people are saying. Slappy, I don't have any idea what you can do with your children's clothing other than Goodwill or Salvation Army. I mean, sending it to Ukraine? Check united24.gov.ua. They might have something. Well, Sarah, if they were speaking some English in Bratislava in 2008, they're speaking more of it now. I don't feel comfortable going to Hungary right now. Orban is too aggressive. He will unleash the goons, Bobby. I think so. That's all the more reason to go, man. Right? That's all the more reason to go. Is to stand with the people who are fighting. Okay. So, guys, I think that's it for me. I'm going to call it a night. Again, thanks to the sponsor of tonight's line, James Boudreau. All righty. Take care, everybody. I will talk to you all on Monday.